Hello Eorzeans, I'm Lakeel Bravestone and welcome to this episode of Remnants of a Realm. In the previous episode we looked back at Camp Dragonhead, Camp Crooked Fork, and the Overlook Reborn questline. As usual, our Patreon supporters were teased with this picture of this episode's first location. We are naturally going to Camp Iron Lake. Camp Iron Lake was an aetheryte camp located to the north of Upper Lenosha and was accessible from both western and eastern Lenosha through these narrow passages. The camp was your standard aetheryte camp with the usual vendors and menders and of course the aetheryte. The aetheryte itself had ethereal gates connecting to Oakwood, Bronze Lake, and Selma's Run, all of which were popular leave quest and grinding locations. But let's take a closer look at them as well, as they all reappeared in A Realm Reborn. First, let's take a look at Bronze Lake. This area was always terribly confusing due to how the map, and frankly the whole game, dealt with portraying elevation on maps. When you look at this map, what area do you think is higher elevation? This or this? Well, if you thought this, you'd be correct. This. This is the higher elevation, which means you spawn in a very limited area with this ethereal gate, and you are forced to get up on the elevated area to actually get anything done, to actually see this famed Bronze Lake at all. But how? Well, as we're all painfully aware, 1.0 didn't have a jumping feature, so the 1.0 dev team made sure to make enough invisible walls so we wouldn't experience any fun of going off their planned paths. Well, let's look at the map again. Entry points to the very important elevated areas were located here, here, and here. Easily located because it's basically where the outline fades out. Sorry, this place just really bothered me back in the day. Anyways, here's the lake. It's very lakey. Moving on to Oakwood. This area was supposed to be cliffy and foresty. The only problem I had with its foresty status was the lack of a forest. Seriously, there were more trees around Camp Iron Lake. Sure, it's cliffy as all hells, but there are barely any trees in this area. At least it was only one level. You didn't have to go looking for faded lines to get to the second level. Oh, and these weird penis things were cave entrances. All 1.0 players knew this because all cave entrances were always one of two designs. This one, or this one, the Lala sausage. Okay, let's agree to never repeat that word ever again. So that leaves Selma's Run. Selma's Run was located here, in what was basically just a useless passage south of Iron Lake. This area was only ever inhabited by surf efts and kobold mendicants, and had no actual features worth mentioning. It had no NPCs, no gathering points, nothing. Some leaves took place here, but that's about it. The only thing that always intrigued me though was the name of this location, Selma's Run. It turns out this area was named after a hunter called Selma who stumbled into an assault force of kobolds at the foot of UGhamaro. The kobolds were not kind and immediately started attacking Selma. Now fatally wounded, Selma heroically ran through the canyon, now bearing his name, to warn Limsa Lominsa of the impending attack on the city-state. Sadly, Selma died of his wounds shortly after, but his warning allowed Limsa Lominsa and its Knights of the Barracuda to prepare for the attack and defeat the kobolds, essentially saving Limsa Lominsa from what could have been a massive tragedy. As a token of Limsa Lominsa's appreciation for Selma's bravery, this area was named Selma's Run. Pretty neat. So that was the ethereal gates around Iron Lake. After the calamity, most of Iron Lake was drained of water due to the newly formed fissures underground caused by the calamity. This made the remaining water highly toxic due to the high sulfur content caused by the kobold mining operations in the area. Camp Iron Lake was mostly destroyed in the calamity as the kobolds saw it fit to push forward from the UGhamaro Mines in the wake of the chaos, claiming most of the area in and around Iron Lake. Brave Lominsans tried to stave off the kobolds but was instead forced to move the camp further south and naming it Camp Overlook. Interestingly, this area was also cut off from the rest of Lenosha's original map design, naming this area Outer Lenosha. This awkward split in geography caused Iron Lake to disappear into Outer Lenosha, while the ethereal gate locations remained in Upper Lenosha. So let's first take a look at Selma's run. In 1.0 it looked like this. After the calamity struck, it looks like this. It's no longer a straight line, but two branching paths, both sort of leading to the same location in both ends. It kinda looks like this mountainish thing might have come out of the ground during the calamity, splitting the path into two. But it could also just have been an aesthetic thing they did in the transition to 2.0, not really putting any lore reason behind it. Second, we have Oakwood. After the calamity, behold, it has trees. This is one of the few areas that still remain disconnected from the main aetheryte location. It now finally looks somewhat foresty. It has loads of them. And now there's a skeleton. Yeah. It's time to address the skeleton. This skeleton belongs to Thalaus. Thalaus was originally located deep inside the 1.0 Cassiopeia Hollow, which we covered in a previous episode. I intentionally ignored this detail in that episode so I could address it properly here. Like I said, Thalaus was located in a chamber in Cassiopeia Hollow together with its twin, Pericos. Thalaus and Pericos were giant sea serpents that, according to Eorzean mythology, was created by Limlane, the Navigator, at the dawn of Eras to fill the empty seas. They later obviously died, and somehow ended up inside Cassiopeia Hollow. But hold on, Lukeal Bravestone, I love you, and also you're handsome, and I love your headband. How can Thalaus be here in Oakwood? Cassiopeia Hollow was located in Eastern Lenosha, and Oakwood is located in Upper Lenosha. Well, yes, you're right. This is actually something that just doesn't make sense, and there really isn't any way to explain it. The skeleton is referred to as Thalaus, so it's not just a lookalike, even the location is named Thalaus. There is one theory out there, though, suggesting that Cassiopeia Hollow was large enough to at least stretch into the far eastern part of Lower Lenosha, which is now called Middle Lenosha, and the calamity shifting the entire cave northeast and finally causing it to burst out of the ground in Oakwood. Literally the polar opposite of where Cassiopeia Hollow was located. Yeah, it's a pretty thin theory. It seems like this was just an aesthetic decision. The skeleton is also way bigger in A Realm Reborn, which makes it look way cooler than it was in 1.0. So that's Oakwood and Thalaus. Let's take a look at the last ethereal gate location, Bronze Lake. And boy did this location change. No longer being just an area, Bronze Lake got upgraded to an aetheryte camp. Much like Iron Lake, Bronze Lake's water got drained, whilst part of the ground below the water was pushed up, revealing massive Nemean ruins. Among them, the Wondrous Palace. After the calamity, hot springs were discovered in the area around Bronze Lake, and the decision was made to construct an aetheryte camp in the area, and it was promptly given the name Camp Bronze Lake. Creative. A hospice for wounded soldiers was also established in the camp named Warm Wine Sanatorium, offering mulled spiced wine as one of its specialties. Now let's turn the clock back to 1.0 and we're headed to UGhamaro Mines. UGhamaro Mines was located to the far north of Upper Lenosha with Camp Iron Lake as the closest teleport point. However, you still had to walk a while to get there as there was no direct route over or around Iron Lake. You still had to walk this route to get there. UGhamaro Mines served as a free dungeon just like Nadalin and Shposhe. God, I really don't want to say that name again. It was designed for a party of 8 of level 50, but it being a free dungeon, you were free to go in with whatever party composition you'd like. You could even tempt fate by going in solo. The quest that introduced you to the mines was called Cobalt and the Beautiful, which required you to enter the mines and apply Coblin Collar to 3 cauldrons located in the mines. The dungeon's loot system was identical to that of Natalin and Shposhe. Certain enemies dropped certain keys to certain coffers. This dungeon held the artifact gloves for Dragoon and artifact pants for Monk. The other coffers dropped various level 50 gear. The final boss of the dungeon was notorious monster 3rd Order Patriarch Suga. Upon defeating him, 3 gold coffers became available. From left to right they contained a sorcerer's hat, a mercenary slops, and a sentinel's cuirass. After the calamity, the UGhamaro Mines changed drastically. From the outside, it seems like the entrance is lifted out of the ground. The inside, however, looks very similar to its 1.0 design. Comparing the two maps, you can see that the 1.0 UGhamaro Mines was much smaller than A Realm Reborn's version. This of course makes perfect sense. A mine will always continue to grow as long as it's in operation. The old 1.0 version fits quite nicely into the 2.0 maps, so it's clear that they did the same here as they did with Natalan, simply keeping the old design but extending and adding to it. The free dungeon system was abandoned in A Realm Reborn, as we all know, but UGhamaro Mines would serve as an important location in the A Realm Reborn's relic questline A Relic Reborn, which we covered in the previous episode, as well as being the place where we finally unlocked Titan roughly 2 years after his planned appearance in 1.0. And with that, we've reached the end of the episode, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Also, a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. You're all amazing. Remember to leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you want more. And as usual, discuss the stuff we've explored in the comments section below. I will be back next week with another episode of Remnants of a Realm. I hope to see you then. We'll finally be covering Living on a Prayer in that episode. You don't want to miss it. See you next week, Eorzeans, and may you ever walk in the light of the crystal.